you want to start with the questions?
I thought he has. Now, we'll ask you not to say so-and-so asked the question.
Okay, this person's working on ideas for a new age learning center to replace prisons. You know, talk about.
Yeah.
With a plan to give humans an idea of how it
In their book?
Yes, it's in the book. And was wondering about an idea that they had that they could use instead of prisons. And it included, she has specific details in mind. Floor plan laid out has ideas for labs, helpers, etc., similar to our circumstance.
I don't think they're qualified to figure a plan like that with this girl. In other words, that would be something that an older member would do.
Right.
And the thing that if you agree, the thing that they could suggest would be trying to help people who are in jail, where they don't try to help them. The Christians go in and try to get them saved, and born again, and all like that. But as far as the prison personnel, where the prisoners are with them all the time, they don't try to help them. There's a lot of corruption in the jails, so it's just like, let's say a merchant catches somebody shoplifting, and if he was trying to be good, like suppose he became interested in some of his work, and he was trying to be good, then he could take that individual and set him down and say, why did you do this? Don't you know you're breaking the law? And try to help them. And that way, rather than getting on the phone and calling the police, it may be, well, let's take that instance in San Antonio. This 90-some-odd-year-old woman was arrested because she was stealing something out of the grocery store. And it wasn't right to put her in jail. But it would have been right to say, how can we help you? You know, grocery stores throw away groceries. They could say, now listen, you come every Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever it is, and let us see what we have that we can help you with.
Or there might be some programs already set up that she could qualify for that she doesn't know
That she doesn't know about.
And they could try to understand her situation and her case, and try then to search out what would be the most appropriate way to help her. That would be helpful. But just nabbing her up, most of the time people are nabbed up, it's out of ignorance. It's like someone will turn to theft and turn to things that would get them thrown in jail because they don't know an easier way or a feasible way to make a living. And when we have seen a lot of the types of robberies and crimes committed, those robberies take a lot of effort and a lot of preparation and a lot of danger. And unless they're just so tuned into wanting the charge of the danger, do you see what I'm saying? Unless they're tuned into that, they could find ways that they could make more money with less effort. If someone would just help let them know what is available to them and how to seek out the ways to get funds or get work. We've seen them go to an awful lot of trouble to get nothing but a little stereo or a little car radio or something like that. You know that the fencing or the resale of that couldn't be worth the effort that they went to get it. And then let's say their problem is the excitement of the danger. If people could discover that is the root of it and help them to find that excitement in ways that weren't doing harm to others, why would they have to deprive someone else or cause someone else to be in a lot of distress just to get their kick or their pleasure. That would, I think people, that kind of, people have to recognize that's sick, that something is wrong, that's very unhealthy for you to want to get a charge at someone else's expense. You see,
And it's lack of knowing.
It's lack of knowing.
If they are taught in that way.
Yeah, like how would they feel if someone did that to them? You see, they've got to take that into consideration. They've got to realize the unfairness of doing to someone else what they certainly would be disturbed when it happened done to them.
In other words, there are a level of people who don't know how to respond in any way other than what they are, other than the environment that they have been raised in. And they may have been raised in an environment where they thought it's okay to steal from your brother or your sister or your neighbor or something and to make money in that way. And most of these little kids who are into these gangs, and they think that's the way of life.
They get stature that way.
Right, and that they think it's okay to do these things until they either are scared by some experience or they outgrow it and realize that a couple of streets over, people don't even do things like that.
Or somebody teaches them that they can get that stature and recognition in a right way without harming somebody else.
And this is what we don't want. I know who that person is because she's had it on her mind ever since, and it's been a sort of a project we gave you all a long time ago, if you remember. It's just a fun thing. But we can't go so far as to actually design this, because somebody may pick up on that and actually do it, and it may not work out.
Might be the law.
And you just don't have enough of the knowledge to know what could and would not work. So the best thing to do is start with working with the individuals, trying to find out what's wrong with them. In jail.
In other words, whoever's in the position that could be in contact with the one who is breaking the law, then they're the ones who should take the responsibility of trying to get to the root of what caused the individual to conduct themselves in that way.
Sincerely searching for it, not just a social worker whose job is there to talk to them and put them down.
Because their pat answers are always unsatisfactory.
The social worker thing is out. I mean, there's just like guards, prison guards. They have them there, but they ought to be in bars, behind bars also.
Most of the guards are are on the take if anybody got any money.
You talk about birds with feathers.
What if
it's all corrupt.
The individual, if I was understanding you right, like say I was a proprietor and he came into my clothing store and he tried to rob me, and somehow I turned it around and got the drop on him or whatever and sat him down and talked to him. What if
Tie him up first.
Before he beat you.
If you all have to add that, we don't know what we're talking about.
Fill in the blank.
You're saying that individual...
If I'm going to be a proprietor of a business like you're talking about, then I have to accept that just like the cash register is part of my responsibility, handling thefts and thieves would be part of my responsibility. Because I'm going to be confronted with that, just like I am confronted with the receipts from the cash register. Therefore, I've got to prepare myself on how I'm going to fairly and justly handle thieves and the thieving problem. If I'm going to be a proprietor in that situation, in fact, nobody's free of it, of taking that responsibility. Even if I'm not a proprietor of a business, if I'm just a homeowner or a car owner or anything else, I have to have thought it out, how I would handle such a circumstance, how I would try to help someone if I caught them in the act of stealing something from my house or breaking into my car. Am I just going to quickly report them and get them thrown in the brig? Or am I going to try to get in a circumstance where I can, since that individual has been, by fate or whatever you want to call it, thrown into my circumstance, then how can I contribute a positive to that circumstance for that individual?
In other words, the merchant has to take the responsibility. Way back in the days of Adam and Eve, you all remember the story of Cain and Abel. Cain killed Abel, and then Cain was exiled from his family, and he went off and started raising he married his twin sister. Didn't even know he had a twin sister.
According to somebody.
And they went off and started raising children, and then he populated the whole nation. Well, not necessarily. I mean, they had a bunch of children, and the children intermarried and so on until they produced quite a gang. And then Adam and Eve had another child who was called Seth. And so Seth grew up and married Abel's twin sister. This is according to this one book that we read just recently. Now, Seth was a man of God, supposedly, and honored God where Cain did not honor God. He worshipped Satan. And Cain had all the things in his kingdom: murder, thievery, everything that was considered things of Satan, sensuality. They had no respect for
Property.
who they slept with and so on. And, they were just a wicked tribe.
Because of the jealousy and resentment of the other brothers.
They were jealous of the goodness, and the Lord refused the offering that Cain gave at the same time that Abel gave an offering, because God knew that Cain was not good, that he was doing it just because he was told to do it. And he told him to go out and become better at giving offerings, but instead he became angry, and he turned against God and cursed God, and of course they joined forces with him. Now the point I'm getting is, eventually, over a period of 3 or 4 generations, the children of God were separated from the children of Cain. And one of the stipulations that the Lord gave to the children of Seth was, don't mingle, don't marry, don't get involved with the children of Cain. Well, he knew that they would, but he was hoping they wouldn't.
He gave them instructions.
He gave them instructions, but guess what? They did it anyway and left. And this left Noah and Methuselah and 3 or 4 others in their kingdom, and the rest of the children of God joined forces with the children of Cain. Now, let's translate this to this time, this generation, and everybody thinks everybody's bad. They can't trust anybody. But eventually, something good has got to come out of deep inside. There are still children of God around, and I'm not talking about the righteous Christian. I'm talking about the children of faith are still around. They still have that teaching that's inside of them on how to turn things around and to become good. And in other words,
where the desire for good dominates.
That's right. In other words, they've got to, and with the help of your little book, we hope that we can bring out that goodness in everybody, and they will strive to find out how to handle circumstances. And in other words, everybody has to take the responsibility of whatever happens into their home. Now, the Lord, way back in the days of Moses, set aside cities for people who were accused of things to go to.
In other words, certain cities were set up so that an accused person before the crowds would have a chance to take their anger out on him or to hang him or something. That the person could go and find a refuge in these towns in order to be protected until the truth was found out. You see, rather than permitting the people just to be the victims of the angry accusers. Now, he's not saying that this story of Cain and Seth and all is accurate, but the lessons are accurate. And that's the reason we're using the example.
In other words, the forces of this garden are luring people into the ways of Cain. Now, we want to try to turn that around and lure them back into the ways of sin.
And to see the value, to see the benefits. You can logically see the benefits of desiring goodness. Have you not logically seen the benefits of the conduct that you have tried to learn, and the disadvantages of the conduct that differs from that? Well, then you want to help people see the benefits of good conduct toward each other and proper actions and taking responsibility for your own actions instead of just dumping that responsibility on somebody else.
It'll take many, many years to change it around. In other words, let's say our thought it was a merchant gunman came in. He was shaking, he was holding the gun at you. He said, "Give me all your money." He said, "Oh, put your gun down. What do you need money for? Maybe I can help you." He said, "You can help me by giving you money out of your cash register." And you can say, "No, that's not the way I want to help you."
And if you have to, you say, "Okay, take it. But I'm not satisfied that I can't help you with why it is you have to take. Why do you have to need it in this way? Maybe there are ways you could get this and much more in ways that wouldn't cause me such distress or others, and I'll help you find those ways."
One time, we may have told you about this, but this was before we met you all, and we were in a campground in Oregon, I think. And this young boy and his wife got in an argument. They acted like they were hopped up on a pot or something, I don't know what it was. And he started dragging his wife by the hair.
That's the truth.
I mean, he had her like cavemen talking.
A couple of 100 yards.
And people were standing around, and the young girl was screaming like crazy. Now, I don't remember if he had a knife or something.
He did have a knife.
He had a knife in his hand. Well, without any thought on my part, I went out to him and I said, "Don't treat her that way," or something like that. "This is your wife that you're treating this way." And he stopped what he was doing. And, of course, he could have knifed me, but he didn't. But he felt my concern for that young girl. And they both started crying. It's like, "My gosh, what have I done?" You know. And they sat over under a tree talking about their problems after that. But all the other people were standing around. Now, it isn't that I was so brave. It was just something pushed me out there. And afterwards I thought, who was that pushed me, you know? But the point of it was that they don't expect something like this to happen. They expect you to gang up on them and tie them up and call
the police and have them
and you
thrown
take
in.
them by surprise and you show them with kindness. And of course the ranger came along, made them leave. But here they were sitting on the side of the campground trying to work out their problems.
And by this time somebody else had already reported
Right.
to the ranger, and so the ranger comes and boots them out.
But it took them by surprise because they are not expecting you to respond in that way. Believe it or not, most of the people, I think, are really afraid to do things that Oh, there are hardened criminals,
Criminals.
criminals.
Hardened criminals.
But deep inside, if you show them a little kindness, they will break down. I met some
Goodness,
that
me
were
too.
really, really tough.
When I was
And they, by just a little kindness, they melted
That's right.
because they're not used to people being kind to them or caring about them. It's a rat race, and they expect people to be hostile towards them immediately. And they get on with the business. And somehow, this needs to be turned around. Because I found an awful lot of goodness, a lot more sincere goodness, and a lot more caring for somebody when I was confined. That doesn't seem right. Of course, they could easily change,
Well,
they could stab you in the back the
yes,
next day,
but you
but
found
they could learn.
That's right, and you found the appreciation for it. There were some individuals that I was confined with who had record of multiple murders, and I didn't even know it when I became friends with them, and then others tried to warn me about them, and by then I knew that the relationship we had, I had nothing to fear with them, and I think what was nice was that I did not know that they had those records, and therefore I had no hesitation to make friends with them and to get into in-depth discussions with them, because they had seen some depth, they had experienced some depth just by the trauma of the extreme of their acts, and they were very open and receptive to kindness and to concern, because they expect after they have done an act to that degree that anybody is going to stay away or be frightened of them or on the defensive against them or to automatically dislike them. And funny thing was, a couple of these seemed to have more substance to them than anybody else I'd encountered. And I think they had learned a tremendous amount by their mistakes. And they were eager to have someone say to them, you have learned a lot by your mistakes, because it helped relieve their being so down on themselves by what they have to go either two routes. They either have to be down on themselves or they have to continue to add wood to the fire of their ill deeds. They have to go one of those two routes, and they think they do until they learn otherwise.
Well, what I found out was that they felt like God didn't want anything to do with them because they had broken the law.
That's right.
And I said, but what about this prodigal son, whatever it is that they keep talking about? And they said, oh, that doesn't mean anything. They didn't even understand it. And so I told them, I said, now, don't you know that anything that you do can be, if you firmly believe that it is wrong and you promise not to do it again, that God will forgive you. And he said, you really mean that? You think that if I made a promise that I would no more walk the streets or steal from anybody, that God would let me be as good as other people that don't do those things? And I said, well, of course he would. Didn't he make you? And why wouldn't he allow you to do that if you're sincere? But he can only take your promises so many times. I mean, if you give him a promise and then you break it, he's not going to believe you. So you've got to prove to him that you're right, that you want to do what's right. And they said, but we don't have the free will to do that. And I said, oh, but you do. That's the only thing you do have is free will. You have the choice to choose what you do the moment you step out of bed every day. All of you do. And they said, not to me. Everybody else might, but I don't. And I said, I'm sorry. What if somebody came to you and asked you to go on rob somebody? Did they force you to do it? She said, no. And I said, well, then why did you go? She says, because I wanted to go. And I said, but you also had the free will not to go. And she said, well, golly, I didn't know I had free will. But it's because they don't know. And she said, from this day on, I'm not going to dye my hair anymore. I'm not going to wear any short dresses. I'm not going to walk the streets. I'm not going to wear any makeup. And I'm going to make God like me. And I'm not going to worry about God not liking me for what I have done.
And of course, the test was, by the time she can stick to that.
She didn't wear any makeup for about 3 or 4 days. Didn't stay very long. But the point of it is, that's inside of her.
That's right. The potential is
The potential
there. The
is
potential of goodness is there.
You see what I'm saying?
Just swallowed
this
up
is
with
what
stomach
we.
someplace.
It can in these boogers, you know, that you can just see them come in and out. I don't know if they're influences. No, I know what it is. It's their past lives or something, or some experiences. I don't know what it is. You know what it is?
It's probably flashes of things they have experienced in the past. Don't know. We'll think about it some more.
Anyway, if Press Odie wants to write about her jail, then it would be more right to tell how to treat people. And, of course, that would apply to anybody on all levels. Help somebody. They need a loaf of bread, give it to them. Don't force them to steal. You know, back in the days of Moses, there were things set aside for the poor and for orphans. Now, feel, the people who
The Lord made them
could only pick
and
so much.
aliens,
And
like
aliens.
the corners of their fields where they couldn't plow too well. They were to save that for transients and for aliens, so that they would have something to consume.
To consume. Now you have to go through all kinds of red tape to get a loaf of bread. And it's ridiculous. With as much as there is in this world, and only not everybody can have part of it. It just doesn't make sense. This is right. It's out of balance.
What's next?
Well, can I ask one more question about this we were talking about? Sure. Okay, the other day, this topic came up at work about capital punishment. And I think I responded right. I wanted to check. But I started mentioning to this individual who believed in it because he had been robbed and he had heard stories about people killing, and he had gone to law school, and he believed that if somebody killed somebody, they needed to get the same thing back. And I said, well, I tried to explain to him that he believes in reincarnation, so on and so forth.
Tim?
No, this is a guy named
It's not important. Go ahead.
Nick. And I told him about the concept of collective karma. And I told him people that just keep killing people because of things that they've done is just adding to their karma, because they're just trying to get rid of the trash, they think. They're just adding to their own karma, and it just keeps coming back to them. And they're not solving anything by taking an eye for an eye, so to speak. And he said that, I must have explained it well at that point. I don't think I'm doing too good right now, but he said that was the best argument against capital punishment that he's ever heard. And it was a real good feeling it was happening, but is that correct?
Well, sure,
Well, sure.
because the process is natural. What is not natural is for you to think that you have the right, or for any human, or group of humans, to think that they have the right to impose that karma. That karma comes naturally. You don't have the right to force it upon them. Now, that karma can also always be averted if the person learns the lesson at the brink of the karma returning. You follow that? In other words, if he has really learned his lesson, if he has done his so-called repentance and changed his direction, then that karma is paid by the effort that it took to repent and change his direction.
But if you get rid of him, he doesn't have a chance to do that, so it's...
No, he would have to do that at another incarnation.
In other words, he'll have to end up in the same spot
Right.
with the choice of
With
whether to
the
kill
same
somebody
choice.
or not
That's
to
right.
kill somebody.
But he won't necessarily have to be killed in return for killing. But he will be at the same brink of being killed for killing, and will be killed if he does not at that point exert the effort to turn his direction around and change his ways. You see what we're saying? And the awful thing is for anybody to think they have the right to be the karma imposer.
Well, you know, back when that eye for an eye and tooth, what is it? An eye,
Yes.
tooth for tooth, what is it?
That's right.
That was back in the days of Moses.
Right,
wasn't it?
that's
and
right.
they had to get some order to
It was
their life.
that's the reason it is misapplied to apply it today.
Mhm.
That was for the primitive society in order to get a little respect. You know, it's just like when the Lord had to wipe out groups of people for their misconduct. You could say, goodness, what a Lord. What kind of Lord is that? And yet he knew that no harm was coming to those minds, that they would quickly have a new opportunity. But he was staging a drama by doing that that was impressive to the spectators, the witnesses, so that they would not commit the same things.
He must have been pretty dead.
It had to be. This was at a very primitive stage of society. And therefore it was at that point more eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Later on, when man has learned better, that would be completely inappropriate. In other words, now man, out of his evil, looks for eye for eye, tooth for tooth, because he wants revenge, vengeance, which is as improper as the criminal act was to begin with.
The whole system needs to be changed so that no one is poor. No one needs to look to somebody for what they have and want it because they don't have as much.
Even if they're lethargic, even if you could say, well, I blame their laziness, they've got to learn their lesson of the value of contributing to life on their own, but they will not learn it upon just depriving them.
You all remember that when we first moved into the Amarillo Crafts, and this plumber hired this man to come and dig to cover up something or do
Right.
something, and he told him he would be back and pick him up at 5 o'clock. It came, and it was 6 o'clock, and it was hot outside, and the man was very neatly dressed, and he needed to make some money. And I'm sure he needed it to buy groceries or something, because nobody does things like that, just that kind of work.
The man had just been taken from the transient labor pool.
For that day. And the plumber, we called, or we didn't, but Marcotti called the plumber and to see if he was coming out. I don't know the whole story there. But the point I'm getting at, it was very cruel and inconsiderate of that plumber to treat that man that way. Anybody that way, just because they are transient workers.
Or itinerant.
The thought of, the fact of it all is that man wanted to work. and he was going through a bad time
And
where
should
he
be
couldn't
respected
find a
for
job.
that.
And he should be respected and treated with respect. It is not right to be that way to individuals.
It's like, he would treat him in that way, but he wouldn't treat someone who
Had
held down a regular,
right,
acceptable position.
big
And
position of some sort.
that's really wrong.
Isn't right?
No one needs help like someone who finds themselves in a circumstance like that when they have no steady job and they are willing to work. They are the last ones who need to have that thrown in their face
Or
with
treated that.
disrespect. Well, you got another question?
I hope I can get this one out here. To explain individuality, one individual got into the evolutionary process of mind, working its way up through many vehicles, following a particular strain, which developed individual characteristics and qualities. I also mentioned a bit about how some animal characteristics are visible in humans, revealing a possibility of what kind of animal they were in a past incarnation, cowboy example, etc. Is there updated information, or would links prefer to handle the subject differently?
Well, I don't really know that that would help the world in any way. What do you think?
Well, I'm not opposed to it because unless you feel that it shouldn't be in there. But I don't feel like everybody needs to. I don't feel like everybody needs to include that kind of information. But if he isn't opposed to it, I don't.
There's no harm in it if they have time to write all this.
It's just hard to write without talking.
Yes.
And
I'll tell you the more important thing to write about if you want to talk about evolution and characteristics, but to not be the points on the boots and turn up with a cowboy hat in relationship to the cows or the horses, but the conduct, when you can see conduct that is a carryover, when you can see patterns well, I can't think of a better word than conduct, because that always shows you people can act like the animals that they were, and you can see the difference in the way they act. And we're not recommending that people, I'll put this in the book, but and certain actions like warblers still haven't, obviously came up through the birds strain, those who love to warble, who love to sing or love to whistle, so it just, those melodies are so much a part of them that they still have to do it. It's like that canary's still coming out, to an extent. But
Might make people stop and listen.
that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it, but you take the bad characteristics that are picked up at an early age in evolution and that they still haven't shed. Like we could talk to you earlier about noticing how these birds act toward each other. And you can see where that has come right on up through the strain of just automatically being on the defensive, and bullies coming into the picture, and the ability to quickly size up the bird that has just come up and see who's going to be the tougher one, who can stand his ground or who has to fly away. And instead of just letting the ones who come up, there's plenty of seed. Why don't they let them come up and have their seed? But you can see that greed and that hostility and that defensiveness comes in long before the human kingdom. But we don't feel like this.
Well, maybe we better start with the birds, a book for birds. Start with the birds.
Train your birds better so that your grandchildren.
Well, if it's in the ether, I think the birds will pick it up. So far, they haven't picked up much of anything.
What next?
How should the subject of death begin, since humans apparently still have to recycle? Should it be clarified or left alone?
Well, yeah, I don't know how in the world you can leave reincarnation. There's just no way you can do it, and that's part of death. When Jesus was trying to say you had to be born of water, or he said you had to be baptized, or whatever you want to say, he was talking about you had to be born of flesh, you had to come into the water of the woman's womb. You had to be born of spirit, which means you've got to leave that vehicle and go into a spirit in order to be born again, which he said, and they born again. By that time they were confused, you know. And then he skipped, you know. He let, sometimes I think that we let out more information than we should, and it just confuses you. And then at certain points Jesus said, of course there'll come a time at the end of this, and he meant at the end of your individual development, when even your body will go up. You will experience a resurrection, you know, and that's, of course, that's where you all are. But they thought, well, let's see, I got to be born of flesh, then I'll be born of spirit, and that means that my body, then I guess, is going to resurrect at the end of the world and go up to heaven. You see how that was completely twisted to mean what he was saying at the end of your human existence, or when you're ready to enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, we're not talking, don't get this confused with saying that this is the completion or graduation into the kingdom of heaven. He was skipping even to a condition such as you are facing. He was skipping to...
Well, they're not, I mean, they're just going through the process. It's what Joe's talking about when he says what you all are going through.
Do you understand?
that?
Mm-hmm. That there will come a time when
humans
there will come a
have to do
time.
this.
That's right.
that they'll have to do it and go in their bodies.
He mixed all that with saying everything that I do, you're going to have to do. You know, it's like it's just a process of growth if you're going to get into the kingdom of heaven. And but in trying to fit those pieces of the puzzle together, there was so many pieces left out of the puzzle that the misinterpretation just went rampant. And so you have all the church-type interpretations of what he had to say, which...
That's one minute. Look at that.
Let me see if I understand that.
What he's still talking about was the ones that would be ready to graduate at that time.
No, he was saying that there will even come a time when you will even take your body up. And that time is even past what we would call graduation from the planet. That is time like what you're doing and what he was doing at that time. Did he not take his body up? And did he not say none have come down, that none are going up that didn't come down, even me?
Not
You see-
everybody.
You see what I'm saying? That didn't mean that that would be their graduation from this planet, because he skipped too many steps in there. I don't know if I should have brought it up, but see, that's the trouble that he got into and that we get into. And you want to be careful in your book not to get into things that they could, that the same misapplication and trouble could come that came in the Gospels. And then Paul took all those misplaced pieces of the puzzle and tried to fill in the gaps and make them logically make sense. And of course, it's impossible to do. And so his effort caused him to be a perfect instrument for the lower forces. Can you see that?
I think what confused him, if I'm not sure, was that you said what they are doing at this time, what these are doing at that time. And I don't know if you can put the two together. Can you? Can you understand what he's talking about?
What he was saying was it was no different than his saying there will come a time, if you continue to go in the right direction, that you will be even doing the same kind of thing that I am now doing.
That's what he's
Speaking of himself. And he was taking a body back into the heavens. You see what I'm saying? But that what he was saying, that was even beyond the end of all these processes. They interpreted that at the end of the world, all the good little folks who said, Jesus died for my sins, will get to resurrect their bodies. You see, and of course that was completely beyond the truth, or just completely off base. Can you understand this? Now, the only reason we're bringing this up is, be careful you don't set people up for the same missing parts to puzzles, so that they can misinterpret things, so that the same events would be available for the balls to come in and try to fill in the blanks, and only be able to fill them in ways that they could be used by forces of this planet.
There's actually a process that we're trying to describe, that we're going through, that enables you at the right time to graduate off the planet, right?
Well, the thing that you're trying to say is that if you ever want to reach the kingdom of the real God and the real heavens, instead of the astral plane of this world, then you have got to want to please Him without limits. And if you do want